Okay, so this is my final video on steps on how to make a denture by Andrew Johansson. This is our final project for our edentialism class, and I'm just going to jump right into it. The first step we got to do to make the cast is take an alginate impression. We do this by using a stock tray to capture alginate impression of both arches. You want to pull and stretch the patient's cheeks and lips and have the patient move their tongue around to define the anatomy and mimic muscle movement. It's really important to obtain anatomy of the vestibule. This is one of the biggest challenges that I had when I was trying to obtain the anatomy of the vestibule on my lab partner in the sim lab. For some reason, I just couldn't do it. I wasn't moving the tray around enough and moving their cheeks enough around. And so it took me about 5 or 6 tries to be able to do this. And I think this will be one of the bigger challenges moving forward, working with real patients. The next step we want to do is pour up those alginate impressions. We can do this by using regular buff stone. This is done in the lab and can be done with relatively cheap stone, like I said before. Again, this is not the master cast, so it does not need to have extremely well-defined anatomy. We use these buff stone models to make our first custom trays. The custom trays are made out of using the Triad True custom tray material. Using the Triad acrylic, it's easy and malleable to use, easy to cut to size, and you want to form it around the model of the patient's edentulous ridge. The best way to do it is keeping it 5 millimeters from the vestibule to avoid any sore spots. You want to cure the triad acrylic on the stone model for one complete turn in the cure machine. Once it's gone over one complete turn, you take it out, take the custom tray off the stone, put it back on the stone, and then put it back into the machine and let it cure for 1 minute. We do this so that the acrylic doesn't adhere to the stone and that you can easily take it on and off. We, once you cure it, we have our custom tray. As you can see, this custom tray has a handle on it, but it is not required to have that. You can either add that or not have it. Either way, it doesn't really matter. The next step we're going to do is take the PBS impression using our custom tray. We do this by taking heavy body and light body, and you're going to want to apply adhesive to your custom trays before you take the PBS impression. That adhesive is going to make sure that the PBS stays onto the custom tray. You can add green stick along the vestibule of the custom tray base to enhance the impression, but you don't need to do this, and the best way and more easier way to do that nowadays is to actually add a bead of heavy body along the vestibule. Next, you want to fill the custom tray with the heavy body wash until you eliminate large and deep discrepancies. You shouldn't do the wash more than 3 times. You can do heavy body and light body if the patient doesn't have a bad reflex. Otherwise, you want to do the heavy body first and the light body last. If the patient does have a gag reflex, you can add small amounts of extra PBS so it's not running down their throat, or you can also put salt on the posterior dorsal tongue. To get the final wash, you do the final wash when there are no large discrepancies in the custom tray that require heavy body. Use light body for the final wash and cover the custom tray completely with light body. Insert the custom tray into the patient's mouth and apply a pressure, a lot of pressure. You want to be able to do this so there are no air bubbles and you get a nice even seal like you see here on the screen. Have the patient open their mouth to the maximum, and then have the patient close the mouth about halfway. Have the patient move jaw side to side and forward to back. Mark your vibrating line, the line that separates the hard palate from the soft palate, using the blue ink to avoid including the temporalis tendon and other movable tissues. If the final denture includes these movable tissues, the denture will not hold a seal and will dislodge easily. Have the patient say "ah" to determine location of posterior palatal seal and movable tissue. This blue line will transfer to the completed custom tray and will transfer from the custom tray to the master cast. Once we have these PBS impressions, we go to our next step, and that is to pour up the master casts. We pour up the master cast by using type 3 or type 4 stone. These will be the official casts we use, so to make another custom tray to make our wax rims on. The reason we use a higher quality stone is because we really want to capture as much detail as we possibly can. The new custom trays we make will be the models for the actual dentures, and so the more anatomy we capture, the better the dentures will fit. The blue ink on the custom tray that we put on earlier will transfer onto the master cast when you pour them up. Drill with a round burr half a millimeter into the center of the blue ink line found on the dried master cast stone model. the posterior palatal ceiling vibrating line that you found earlier in step 4. This will create a positive projection into the final denture to help with the palatal seal. Follow the whole blue line and smooth it out. Next, we're going to build our wax rim onto the master cast. For the maxillary rim, you want to have 10 millimeters from the incisive papilla, tip to wax imaginary tooth number is 8 and 9. For the maxillary and mandibular rims, you want it 8 millimeters thick in the anterior portion and 6 millimeters thick on the posterior portion. For the maxillary rim, the total length should be 22 millimeters from top to bottom, from apical tip of acrylic triad base to the coronal tip of the wax. And for the mandibular, you want 18 millimeters in total height. Use your artistic intuition to make adjustments if necessary. The next step is we're going to try the wax rim in the patient. Again, this is one of 2 of the most important steps we're going to do in making the denture. This is done on the patient. You want to have your patient relax, have the patient smile, check buccolingual positions of wax rims, and ensure maxillary centrals are facial to the incisive papilla. One step that Dr. Durham taught us to really help us with this wax rim try-in is something called dress to the 9s. It's 9 steps to make sure that you get that wax try-in completely and utterly aesthetically pleasing, because this is going to be the next step before we put in the teeth into the wax rims. And so I'm just going to read them out aloud and we can talk about them later. The first being the buccolingual position of the maxillary central incisors. Number 2, incisal length of maxillary central incisors. Number 3, maxillary occlusal plane angle. Number 4, buccal corridor. Number 5, maxillary midline position. Number 6, maxillary midline angle. Number 7, the zenith line. Number 8, buccal lingual position of mandibular central incisors. And number 9, incisal length of mandibular and central incisors. Once you get dress to the 9s complete, you're going to have a completed wax rim, and the next step you're going to do is create a bite mark with the wax rim. This is going to ensure that everything you did in dress to the 9s is going to stay put, and then you're going to mount those wax rims on the articulator. So normally the lab does this part and then the next step after you place it on the articulator is placing the teeth into the wax rims. Normally the lab will do this part, but I'm going to go over it in this video because we had to do it in the sim lab and I want to talk about it. This step turned out to be pretty difficult. It is important to get the midline just right, or else the dentures will look pretty bad and you will have to redo the entire process. This step really gave me an appreciation for the lab techs. I thought my teeth looked pretty good until I saw the wax try-ins downstairs when Dr. Durham was trying them in on the patient and realized mine looked like crap. I'm glad I'll never have to do this step in the future, or else my patients probably would never come back to me. That takes us to the next step. Once you get all the teeth in, you're going to check occlusion, make sure that the occlusion is just right, and then you're going to try the actual teeth in the patient, but that is still wax, believe it or not. These are the wax try-ins that Dr. Durham showed us the lab did. Compare that to mine, which don't look nearly as good, and so I'm glad that the lab techs with their expertise can do this for us. So the next step is to try the wax in the patient. This is done on the patient, and you're going to need to tell the patient that they're not going to fit. We're just trying to see if the teeth are in the right place. Have the patient stand in front of a large mirror in your operatory to take a look. Small hand mirror is too close, and usually very few people in their life will get that close, so it's better to have them stand in front of a large mirror. Have the patient say, "Sue is missing a piece." Tell them they have 3 shades. So the reason we have them say Sue is missing a piece is to make sure that the occlusion is just right and make sure that they can speak normally and not have a sh or a s sound, to see if we need to make any adjustments. Also, in this step with the wax try-ins, the patient is going to be choosing the shade of their teeth. And Dr. Durham talked to us about having 3 shades to make it less complicated for the patient. The 3 shades he talked about were average, lightened, and darker. Darker looking more like an older person's teeth, lightened being pretty white, and average being, an average 20-something-year-old patient. That also, you're going to choose the tooth molds or the tooth shape of the for the patient. Um, and it's like just like the shade, it's easier for the patient to choose between just a few shapes instead of the 20 or 30 that come from the manufacturer. And so it's better to figure out which ones you like as the dentist beforehand, and then show those to the patient and let them decide which ones they like the best. If the vertical dimension is too short, too long or too short, you have to do the wax rim again. And so that's what Dress to the Nines is going to help you with, so that the vertical dimension isn't too short. If the vertical dimension is slightly short, you can get creative and try to fix it. Um, if the midline is off, same thing. Usually you have to send it back. Draw a new midline and send it back to the lab. You can tweak individual teeth if you want because the teeth are still in wax. Um, this is mostly referring to twisting the teeth or moving them apically or coronally slightly, ever so slightly. If you need a major adjustment, you're probably going to have to redo and start from step one. Um, Once we get the wax try-ins where we want them, we send that back to the lab, and they're going to send us the real dentures, and we're going to do the final denture delivery. What we do is we insert the maxillary denture and ask the patient if there are any sore spots. Insert the mandibular and maxillary dentures and have the patient bite down. Ask the patient again if there are any sore spots. Check your contacts and exclusive contacts. Adjust inappropriate contacts. Sore spots become more common as the denture gets loose. Do chair side relines. Resin composite material that you add to the intagular surface will make a better fit. Not as pretty as indirect relines, but patients prefer it because it fits so much better. The most common sound issues we have with dentures is the S sound. Um, Once we fit the dentures in, we want to give our patient education. Now, we can have a lot of problems with dentures. Tongue biting can happen. Cheek biting can happen. Sores are very common within the first 24 hours, so it's important to let your patients know that it might be a little bit uncomfortable, but that they will get used to it. Function. Start out slow for 2 weeks. Eat soft foods, breads, yogurt, stuff like that. You only get 10% of the original function back with dentures, and so it's important to emphasize that to your patients so their expectations aren't too high and they're not trying to eat an apple the first day in. It takes about 5 months for the brain to get used to dentures. Brush your denture without toothpaste because dentures do accumulate biofilm, and soak them in denture solution stuff overnight. Take dentures out at night so tissues can breathe, or else you'll get this inflammatory papillary dysplasia. And so it's important to make sure that your patients are maintaining their dentures, taking them out to breathe, or else they will get sore spots. They can have speech issues, and you're going to need to make realignment adjustments if necessary. And so that's the end of my slideshow. I appreciate this whole semester. I learned a lot, and I'm excited to apply what we learned this semester on a real patient. Thanks for listening.